Hare Krishna. It's okay, it's okay. Gita is so far. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Gopi Jana Vallabha. Oh, it's broken.
Yes, I can.
Yasodhanandana Prajajanarandana Yasodhanandana Yamunatira broken. Huh? The mridanga is broken. Yeah, you go like this. Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishnaya Gatave Srimate Krishna Gosvāmī Prabhupada Saitanya Prakashayati Raja Acharan Gilvan Sadhu Gatpate Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Om Jnana Timirandasya Ganangyana Salakaya Chaksurun Militam Dena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadhamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shiguro Shijuta Padakamalang Shiguro Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Shajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakambitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesa Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vindavanispari Visabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarvyascha Kripa Sindhuvya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, Chapter 5, Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. Text number 23. Śaknotīhaiva. Is that correct? Please repeat after me. Śaknoti iha eva yaha soḍhuṁ prāk śarīra-vimokṣaṇāt kāma-krodha udbhavam vegaṁ yuktaḥ sukhī naraḥ śaknotīhaiva soḍhuṁ prāk śarīra-vimokṣaṇāt kāma-krodhodbhavaṁ vegaṁ yuktaḥ sukhī naraḥ śaknotīhaiva soḍhuṁ prāk śarīra-vimokṣaṇāt kāma-krodhodbhavaṁ vegaṁ yuktaḥ sukhī naraḥ. Somebody else? śaknotīhaiva soḍhuṁ Mataji's. Word for word meaning. Śaknoti is able. Iha in the present body. Yaha one who. Soḍhum to tolerate. Prāk before. Śarīra the body. Vimokṣaṇāt giving up. Kāma desire. Krodha and anger. Udbhavam generated from. Vegam urges. He yuktaḥ in trance. He sukhī happy. Naraḥ human being. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada K. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. Everybody, please repeat after me. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. Purport. If one wants to make steady progress on the path of self-realization, he must try to control the forces of the material senses. There are the force of thought, forces of anger, forces of mind, forces of the stomach, forces of the genitals, and forces of the tongue. One who is able to control the forces of all these different senses and the mind is called gosvāmī or svāmī. Such gosvāmīs live strictly controlled lives and forgo altogether the forces of the senses. Material desires, when associated, generate anger, and thus the mind, eyes, and chest become agitated. Therefore, one must practice to control them before one gives up this material body. One who can do this is understood to be self-realized and is thus happy in the state of self-realization. It is the duty of the transcendentalist to try strenuously to control desire and anger. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. śaknotīhaiva soḍhuṁ prāk śarīra-vimokṣaṇāt kāma-krodhodbhavaṁ vegam yuktaḥ sa sukhī naraḥ. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, is well situated and is happy in this world. So here, Lord Krishna clearly explains about the process whereby if one wants to be happy in this world, then one must, before giving up this body, he should be able to control the senses and check the force of desire and anger. The human form of life is meant for self-realization, and therefore self-realization can only be achieved right from the very beginning for those who are on the spiritual path to control the senses and the mind. If one controls the urges of the material senses and the mind, definitely one will be able to check the force of desire and anger, krodha and kāma. As long as we have this material body, we will always be on the struggle of checking the urges of the senses and the mind. When one comes to the transcendental platform, then the material senses is automatically controlled, and that includes the mind. It specifically mentions here that a self-realized soul is happy because he's in that state of self-realization, understanding that he is not the body, that he is a spirit soul. So it is not so easy in the beginning to control the senses. When we say the senses, that includes the mind, because the mind is the central focus of the senses. To control the senses, the mind has to be controlled. No one will be able to control the mind if the senses is not fully under control. You must have seen the picture of the soul being the passenger, the senses compared to the wild horses, the rein is the mind, and the intelligence is the driver. And the chariot is the body. So as long as we have this body, this material form, all of these different urges, especially says here, the sense of speech, that means forces to talk, the forces of anger, the forces of mind, forces of the stomach, forces of the genitals, and the forces of the tongue. When I read the purport, immediately goes back, reminded me of the first instruction of Sri Upadesamrita, the Nectar of Instruction. Let us read that one, okay? This is a book, treatise by Srila Rupa Gosvāmī, who is one of the 6 Gosvāmīs of Vrindavan. Vacha vegaṁ, manasa krodha vegaṁ, jiva vegaṁ, udarupashta vegam itam vegam yo vishaheta dira sarvam apimang prithvim shashishya. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the action of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals, is qualified to make disciples all over the world. This is a translation of Srila Prabhupada, Upadesamrita, or Shri Upadesamrita. He translated it as the Nectar of Instruction. So how can we control all of these different urges or forces, especially the tongue? It's very difficult to control the tongue. Sometimes, or very often, we will speak before we think. It's like the tongue is quicker than the mind. But the mind is actually faster. But we never think before we speak. That puts us into trouble. It says that the use of the tongue is to vibrate and to also taste. If one has to speak, one should be speaking in a palatable way. Truth has to be spoken. But usually when one speaks the truth, if it is not palatable way, it hurts. Truth hurts. There's a saying like that. We don't want to hear the truth, but the truth has to be spoken. So if you have to speak the truth, it should be done in a very nice way. If one speaks truth and the other person not able to understand what you're saying, that means you're not speaking the truth. Does it make sense? Because truth has to be spoken and it should get through, that the listener or the hearer should be able to understand. If you're going to speak, only speak about in relation with Krishna. Otherwise, if one speaks not in relation with Krishna, then one is only inviting death. If one speaks nonsense, if one speaks like, what do you call, village talk, what do you call it, gram kata? Huh? Prajalpa is different thing. Prajalpa also. Yes. Of course in Vrindavan, everything they talk is about Krishna. Even Prajalpa is also about Krishna. It's not really Prajalpa. But if we talk about nonsense things like politics or what's going on in the mundane world, of course, we should not be naive. We should also know what's going on in the world to keep us updated. But we should always relate it to Krishna. So it says in the Nectar of Instruction that if you speak that has nothing to do with Krishna consciousness, is like a frog talking or croaking, inviting death, inviting snake. Prabhupada in the Purport says, come and eat me, come, I'm ready, come and eat me. So any moment, death, which is compared to the snake, will bite you and then that's it. Then the purpose of human form of life will not be attained. So if you're going to speak truth in a palatable way and only speak which is pleasing, which has something in relation to Lord Krishna. Another function of the tongue is to taste. Yes, to taste. To taste only Krishna Prasad, to eat only Krishna Prasad. But one should not be also overeating. That's one of the urges of the tongue, to eat. And if you're going to eat over more than what is required, then one will fall sick. Then how can one perform service? As Prabhupada said, health first, then sadhana, and then seva. It's like here in Vrindavan, practically every day we have a feast. You can eat as much as you like, but then Prabhupada says, if you eat like a horse, work like a horse. It's not that you work or you eat like a horse and then you sleep all day. Then it's not going to help one in self-realization. Yes, the vibration. We should chant as much as possible the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and talk about Krishna's name, fame, form, qualities, and pastimes. Then, even at the time of death, if we are engaged in that manner, in that way, then one will not take birth again in this material world. Forces of anger. Anger. One becomes angry, especially when one is not able to fulfill one's desire. If we're going to desire, it should also have something in relation with Lord Krishna or his devotees. If we're going to desire, it should be spiritual desire. It's like when you are in front of the deities, what is it that you pray to? What is your desire? The materialists, when they are in front of the deities, their desires are material because they are fruitive actors, fruitive workers. So their desire is only to increase their material sense enjoyment. But for a devotee, when we're in front of the deities, we should only aspire to engage more and more in Krishna consciousness. It's like when we chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is like a wish-fulfilling desire tree, a kalpa vriksha. So it fulfills all your desires, both material and spiritual desires. However, the materialists, when they're not able to fulfill their material desires, they become angry. Just like a child. A child, if the child wants something and the parents are not able to give, then the child will cry. And he'll also go into tantrum. And he will even bang his head on the floor. Have you seen that? Those who have children? Yes? Because they cannot obtain, they cannot fulfill their desire. So desires can be dovetailed for Krishna consciousness. If we're going to desire, as much as possible, it should have a relationship again in Krishna consciousness. If one fails to fulfill one's desire, then one becomes angry. And it shows. Prabhupada says here, it shows in your eyes. Remember that? Yes. Material desires, when unsatiated, generate anger, and thus the mind becomes so disturbed, will not know what to do, not be able to focus, not able to concentrate, not be able to do something, not be able to accomplish anything, because the mind is disturbed. Many things to do, many things to be accomplished, but not be able to finish even one. Do you have that experience sometimes? If your mind is disturbed, you will say, "Don't even talk to me. I'm disturbed." You can see it from the person. The face is the index of the mind. You can see a person who is disturbed through his face. You can see a person, if he's happy, through his face as well. And a person who is angry, his eyes. What is the color of the eyes when a person is angry? Red, yes, reddish. Almost crying in anger. Cannot, it's like, you be careful. If you come closer, you'll be burned into ashes out of anger. The chest, what happened to the chest? Breathing very fast. The nervous system is almost going to be shot. These are the symptoms of a person who's angry. So better be watch out. Don't get too close. Unless you have a relationship and you'll be able to calm that person. If not, be careful. Don't get too close, or else you'll get burned as well. Because a person who is angry is like burning like fire. So, again, the mind has to be peaceful. And how the mind can be peaceful? Prabhupada says, there's no way that the mind can be peaceful. The only solution is to be Krishna conscious. No way that the mind can be controlled, because the mind is always chanchala. It's like Lakshmi. You get the Lakshmi today, tomorrow it'll go to somebody else's hand. It doesn't stay in one's hand. So the mind is like this. Pulling and pushing, thinking, feeling and willing. Oh, shall I do this? Oh, no, maybe I should do a different thing. Oh, what shall I do? Yes, that's why the person whose mind is disturbed, he cannot be determined. Those whose mind is peaceful, their determination is so strong, they can move mountains. Forces of the mind, forces of the stomach. Again, we talk about stomach. All the disease starts from the stomach. If one overeats, again, in the Nectar of Instruction, right? One should not overeat. People think that when a person is fat, he's healthy. That's not true. Most in the 60s or in the 70s, there is no fat people you'll see. Practically, they're all slim. It's only in the 90s or 80s, a little bit still not so fat, but 90s and 2000. Number one, disease starts from the stomach. Because you'll not be able to digest. You keep eating and eating and eating. Every 2 or 3 hours, it takes about 6 to 7 hours before one can digest the food. And if one is keep eating and eating and eating, it just gets all stuck up inside. And therefore, that is the main or the root cause of all diseases. I was talking with one devotee from America, and he had cancer. So his solution, he found some solution. It's like a new diet. Is that to eat less and just juice and fruits. And the cancer started to go away. And he looks like a young man. He's like 77 years old. And when I saw him, he looks like a young man. I asked him, what is your secret, Prabhu? And he told, okay, are you ready to listen? Then I sat down with him because he visited here a few weeks ago. Yeah, we have to take care of our body in order to serve Krishna properly. And he looks like a young man. I says, I want to be like you because you look like energetic. So one must be very careful what we put in our system and how much we put. Because according to Ayurveda, we only need like what? 50% water, right? 25% food and 25% air. Sometimes devotees eat up to the neck. And then there's no more air, so there'll be more gas and indigestion, and then you will not see them for a few days because of diarrhea or whatever. So one must be very careful. The forces of the genitals, yes, is meant for producing Krishna-conscious children. As Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, if I know that I can have children even 100 times to be Krishna-conscious for sure, then I don't mind. In India, there is no family planning, isn't it? In China, they have family planning. Of course, not for Krishna consciousness, but very soon will surpass China in population, which means it'll be more difficult to supply food and all the necessities in life. So, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the tongue, the stomach, and the genital is in one straight line. If you can control the tongue, the stomach, and the genital, then it's easy to control the mind and it's easier to become Krishna conscious. Such a person is called a gosvāmī or a svāmī. They're the same. These are the titles given to those who are in the renounced order of life. Swami, master. Gosvāmī, master of the senses. That means all the different senses acquiring knowledge, and also that includes the mind. And as a sannyasi, he controls his thoughts, his actions, his speech, and fully dedicated 24 hours in Krishna consciousness. So, being a sannyasi in spirit doesn't mean that you have to change your cloth in lal kapra, in red color. Prabhupada says, I want all of my disciples to be sannyasis. In spirit. Of course, women, they're not supposed to take sannyas. But this is for men. But in spirit. So what does it mean by Swami or Gosvāmī in spirit? That means fully dedicated 24 hours in Krishna consciousness. Fully surrendered unto the Supreme Lord. They do everything for Krishna's pleasure. No ulterior motive, no self-interest, no hidden agenda. That is a sannyasi. So it is open, even though it's like most of the associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they are in the grihasta ashram. But they are all fully under control. Their senses, their mind, their intelligence, their thought. How many sannyasi disciples Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has? Not very many, but most of them are grihastas. That even when there is this one Brahmana, when he was in South India, one Brahmana would like to join him, grihasta. He says, no, stay where you are, but be Krishna conscious. Dedicate yourself in spreading Krishna consciousness as well. Because Swami or Gosvāmī or those who are in the sannyas order of life, it is meant for preaching. One cannot be a sannyasi. Of course, there are two kinds, or four kinds of sannyasis. One is what? Bahuda, Kutichak, Paribrajacharya, and Paramahamsa. When one first takes sannyas, he lives outside of his village and he will do madhukari, kutichak, yes. He will do a house to house. One is just like he's just waiting, some food will come. then he'll be satisfied. And there's another one, parivrajacacharya, that means he's traveling all over the world. And then when he becomes ultimately perfected, liberated, then he will be, just stay in one place and be in samadhi. That's paramahamsa. But Prabhupada says, work now, samadhi later. But Prabhupada, even he is in the paramahamsa platform, he still traveled all over the world to preach, to save the conditioned souls. So sannyasis or gosvāmīs, they live strictly controlled lives and forgo altogether the forces of the senses. That means tapasya. That means austerity. Now, irregardless whether we are a brahmachari, vanaprastha, grihastha, or sannyas, everyone who wishes to go back home, back to Godhead, has to follow a certain rigid, what do you mean by rigid? Strict. We have to be strict. We can say, oh, I'm a grihastha, it's okay. Tapasya is only for brahmacharis and sannyasis. No, grihastha especially. Grihastha means you have a license. You have a license for sense enjoyment. But you cannot break that license. That license is strict. But if you go beyond your license, you have to pay for that. There are some restrictions, but if you go beyond that, then there is a reaction. Of course, in India, if you have a driver's license, it doesn't mean anything. You can do whatever you like. You don't have to stop in the stoplight. I never seen people driving, stopping in the stoplight here or a stop sign. They just, stop means go in India. No, in America, you cannot do that. You should drive in your own lane. That is the restriction. So if you drive on a different lane, you'll get an accident. So grihastha must be very, very careful. Even though you have this license for sense enjoyment, it cannot be overused. You cannot go beyond, otherwise there is karma. Rigid, strictly. Everyone must follow strictly. Not just for the sannyasis or the brahmacharis. It is meant for everyone. It says here, therefore one must practice to control them before one gives up this material body. When is this urges of the tongue, urges of the stomach, urges of the mind is going to stop? Until we leave this body. The difference, a sannyasi, they know how to say no. Because that's what it's supposed to be mean. You're controller of the senses. But everyone should be. Even grihasthas should learn how to say no. And if you reach that platform, that means you're no different than one who is in the renounced order of life. That is the difference. The attraction for Maya will always be there as long as we have this material body. It will not go away. But a liberated person who's controlled the urges of the senses, the mind, and so on, knows how to say no. That is the difference. And if one becomes a slave of the senses and the mind and the different kinds of urges, then he is a godas. He is the opposite of gosvāmī. He is the servant of his senses. And therefore, one cannot become fully self-realized. One cannot become Krishna conscious. one will become in the miserable condition of life. One cannot be happy. And the goal of life is to be happy all the time, not only on the weekends. All the time, and that happiness that we are striving for is unending and unlimited happiness. The materialists, their happiness is flickering for a few moments only. After that, they always hanker to be happy. But that, Prabhupada says, the materialist sense of happiness is part of their miseries. Because you cannot be satisfied. You always want more and more and more, but you cannot be happy. In Krishna consciousness, one can be happy even just a drop of that happiness from engaging oneself in Krishna consciousness. And that's why I think why we're still here, isn't it? You had that experience of that happiness. So what we are aspiring for is to have that happiness, spiritual happiness in Krishna consciousness constantly, all the time. And it is possible. It is possible. Because in our movement, there are many pure devotees. And we can see that when they're engaged in Krishna consciousness, their happiness is very, very infectious. That when you see them, hey, that energy I want to have also. I want to be like that person. I want to be happy like him. He's happy in Krishna consciousness. I want to be like that. But we have to pay the price. It's not so easy. It's very difficult to attain that if we are loose, if we are not restricting our senses and the mind only for the service of Lord Krishna. He is well situated and is happy in this world. When we check this, especially anger. How can you get rid of anger? This was asked Bhishma Dev in the last stage of his life. To control anger, you have to be simple. What does it mean to be simple? Practical. Don't strive for things that you cannot reach. Just be satisfied with what we have and we will be happy. Because whatever we actually need, Krishna will give. Krishna will not give something to his devotee that his devotee doesn't need. But the materialists, even if they don't need, they just want. Sometimes I've been asked, Maharaj, what do you need? Do you need anything that I can bring for you? Oh, I'm thinking, what do I need? I have everything practically, except being Krishna conscious. But the materialist is not what they need, it's what they want. And want means desire more and more and more. And you cannot be happy. It becomes greed now. Need or want or greed, they're all different. The materialists, they want more and more and more because they're greedy. But devotees should be also greedy. In a different sense. Be greedy to do more service. Be greedy to help others to become Krishna conscious. And that is the price that we have to pay to become Krishna conscious. That greed. Like materialists, they're greedy for money. Money, 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 sweeter than honey. Devotees should be also greedy. Whatever service you can do, try to do it. But not to the expense that you commit offenses to others. Because I've seen devotees, they're like super enthusiastic, but then they commit offenses to others. one must be very careful as well, because the most severe offense to the devotee is to take away his service. Because that is his service to Krishna. Why are you taking that away? It is only between the devotee and Krishna. You cannot go in between. If you go in between, then you commit an aparad. Then how can you make advancement? Instead of making advancement, then you will see yourself far away from the association of devotees. So, one who can do this is understood to be self-realized and is thus happy in the state of self-realization. So we have to control our desire and anger by controlling the senses and the mind, by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and being fully engaged in Krishna consciousness 24 hours. It's like when we say, Prabhuji, I'm just gonna go and take rest. Have you heard that from a materialist? No, you'll hear, I'm gonna go to sleep. Because we have to take rest. Our body needs to take rest. In order that one is fully rested, then we also continue serving the Supreme Lord. Hare Krishna. Any questions? Comment? Yes, sir. You have a mic? Back the mic. There's a question right there. It's kind of loud. Speak farther, okay?
Hare Krishna.
Yes. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj. You mentioned if we try to speak the truth and the recipient doesn't understand, then we're not actually speaking the truth.
Yes. Because it didn't get through. Because if you say something true and I'm not able to understand what you're saying, then I'm not hearing the truth from you. It makes sense?
Yes.
You may be saying the truth according to you, but I'm not able to understand what you're saying. It is not the truth then. It makes sense, right?
Yes, it makes sense.
It makes sense. It has to be clear and palatable.
If I can ask one more question then.
Sure.
So perhaps you can see that many materialists are very eloquent in their speech. They have lots of skill and can present
Yeah.
philosophy in a nice way. So as devotees, can we learn from them how to speak and how to impart truth, or is it entirely dependent upon our level of spiritual realization?
There are two kinds of truths. Relative truth and absolute truth. Boshon. Relative truth and absolute truth. So if you're going to speak, always try to speak absolute truth. Sometimes there is also what you call white lie. Have you heard of white lie? Trying to tell the truth, but it's like there's an icing, there's a cover. It's like, what's that again? We gave that example again. The elephant. Asvatam is killed. Correct? Then became angry. Who was told that? To tell Yudhishthira, right? That lie. So, yes, if we hear others how they speak, you can learn. We should be just like a honeybee, that you can extract good things from everyone, even from nature, even from animals, and apply it in Krishna consciousness. That's okay. But don't follow them like what they are. We should be able to be a good observer and try to see things in everyone. That's okay. But then sometimes devotee says, oh, let me go to college first also so that I can preach. You don't need to go to college or back to school to preach. You just read Bhagavad Gita every day. You just chant sincerely the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. I never learned how to speak just by reading Prabhupada's books. You learn everything from Prabhupada's books. You learn everything from what you hear from Prabhupada's lectures and interviews and addresses, conversations. It is not, you know, to think that, oh, let me hear more from outside. Prabhupada says, don't go outside of the four walls of the Krishna Balaram Mandir. You will never see me going to Loy Bazaar every day. And when I go there, he says, Maharaj, where have you been? Well, I've been here the whole time. You don't see me. Don't go to Loy Bazaar. If you want to forget Krishna, you go to Loy Bazaar. Because you can spend the whole day there and just think, oh, this is nice, this is nice, this is good, this is... No. It's okay if you're going to do if you're going to do some like a project, then you can hear specific topic, but don't be like, you know, delve into it. You'll get lost. You understand? You understand what I'm saying? So be very careful. People think that, you know, they can find Krishna somewhere in Vrindavan. No, you'll only find Krishna hearing from the right source, from sadhus. Just like Prabhupada says, when you come to Vrindavan, don't go here and there like a spiritual tourist. If you come to the holy dham, you must hear from the right source, from the sadhus. Then you will see Vrindavan. But Maharaj, I'm only here for 3 days. What can I do? I want to go all over the you know, like all over Vrindavan. But you cannot take much in 3 days here. Better you just absorb more in hearing and chanting. That will have more effect. Of course, you'll get some benefit if you go here and there, but you'll get the most benefit if you hear from sadhus, right source. So if you're gonna hear from the internet, so many things there, you'll get lost, entangled by the web, World Wide Web. It's like, you know, the insects get caught, cannot get out. That's it. Okay, anything else? Yes. Speak slowly.
Thank you for this. Where come from the strength, this force, this urge? Where do they come from?
Where does it come from?
Yes.
From the mind.
And the mind comes from Krishna?
Everything comes from Krishna. Even your minute independence comes from Krishna. Even from you coming to Krishna consciousness comes from Krishna. Even if you're being illusion in the material world, that comes from Krishna also. That is our choice. We're given a choice to be with Him or to be in Maya. If we are with Him, then we'll be happy. If we are in Maya, then we suffer. But He doesn't want us to suffer. It is there for us to learn. The whole material world is a school. for us to learn that someday we will graduate and they will go back home, back to Godhead. Otherwise, we will be failing. You will not go in grade 2. You'll always be in grade 1. But Krishna doesn't want this. Krishna wants you to go up, 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 up until you get out of this material world. Everything comes from Krishna. Even anger, desire, hate, lust, envy, illusion, all of this. But we should learn to get rid of them by reading Bhagavad Gita, association with the Vaishnavas, chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and honoring prasadam. But not too much. Just enough. So that you can do your service. Okay? So we stop here. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Taigor Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.